My racist college professor framed me for plagiarism, so I fought back by marrying his daughter in Vegas. I used to be your very stereotypical slightly nerdy, slightly skinny Indian dude before this professor transformed my life with his close-mindedness. Basically, I was originally in college to be a math major with a long-term goal of being a professor. However, the guy who taught Intro to Linear Algebra, Professor Hanover, seemed to have a personal vendetta against me. He exclusively called me Brownie, randomly called on me to answer difficult questions, and often used me as an example of what not to be for the students. I asked my friends about it, and apparently it was common knowledge that Professor Hanover just didn't like brown or black students. What I never expected, though, was for Professor Hanover to mess with my final exam. Basically, it was your stereotypical exam where the last problem was an in-depth word problem that required explanations. I'm usually crap at these problems, but when I saw problem number 8, I somehow connected it to a larger physics concept that I understood really well. I even doodled a diagram of the physics thing in the top right. However, when we got our exam papers back, I received no grade and was just informed that I had to see Professor Hanover after class. Imagine my shock when he showed me the final page of my exam, a photocopy of the final exam for a student next to me, who was basically at the top of the class, and a word-for-word match in our answers to section C of problem 8. I was shocked because I knew I didn't cheat, but the other person sat ahead and to the right of me, so there's no feasible way they could have cheated. My professor then told me that he had already informed the university of my cheating and plagiarism, that my parents were being contacted at that moment, and that I would soon have to meet with our academic integrity committee, which is notorious for declaring kids expelled within the first 10 minutes of a hearing. I was terrified and stunned, but I knew I had nothing to prove my innocence other than my word, which was up against this tenured professor's. The next week pretty much changed my life. My parents called me and screamed at me, threatening to disown me for cheating because that wasn't how I was raised. I was shunned from my peers, and I had to prepare a flimsy case to the academic integrity committee. When I took a closer look at the question that I'd responded to and realized that the response which my professor claimed I had cheated on and copied didn't make sense to me. Because I had approached the entire problem from an applications angle, focusing on the geometric physics of it, but this particular response was much more theoretical and, frankly, above my understanding. I looked over my response over and over again until I became certain that the plagiarized answer definitely couldn't have been mine. I didn't write like that, all my other answers had a different approach to the problem, and it didn't sound like me at all. And it was an incredibly flimsy argument when I presented it to the Academic Integrity Board, until I was fortunate enough to realize that although the handwriting on the exam was slightly different, the O's in question 8C looked like they started and ended at the top center, whereas the O's in all the other parts of question 8 and in the rest of my final started and ended at the bottom center. In short, I was basically accusing my professor of changing my answer and rewriting it to look like mine, and 3 of the people on the board laughed at me when I pointed it out, but one of them, who was an actual physicist, seemed to at least understand my argument that I had used an applications-based explanation for 8A, 8B, and 8D, whereas 8C randomly became much more theoretical. They apparently had also found a meeting log of my report with my academic advisor where I had complained about discriminatory treatment from Professor Hanover, and that, coupled with the other evidence I presented, was enough to change their minds about expelling me. So, instead of kicking me out of college, they just gave me 0 points for all of problem 8, but my average was still high enough for me to pass the class. But at this point, I was mad. I had a very firm suspicion that Professor Hanover had intentionally framed me for cheating, and I wanted revenge, so I decided to play it for the long con, and I hit up his daughter Haley on Snapchat. Now, Haley is a biochem major and she has pretty much no normal connection to me, but I guess she found me cute, because we started talking. We connected pretty well, and we decided to meet at a party, where things got hot and heavy between us, and it was then that I saw my opportunity. I was going to date Professor Hanover's daughter, sincerely, just to see the look on his face when she introduced us at Thanksgiving. And so I doubled down on my attempts to woo Haley, but it was pretty easy because we were genuinely so compatible. I think I would have fallen in love with her regardless of Professor Hanover, to be honest, and I even ended up telling her the whole story about him reporting me for cheating, me being pretty sure that he had framed me, and him basically ruining my family life with my parents forever because of that. Haley was super sympathetic and straight up confessed that her dad was racist, and it felt reassuring to finally have that confirmation and validation. This was around 5 months into our relationship. And since Haley knew the truth about the bad blood between me and her father, she helped me avoid him at all costs and only mentioned me as the boyfriend and never by name, but everything changed one drunken night. As you might have gleaned from the title, we got way too wasted, sauntered up to the Marriage License Bureau in Las Vegas right before they closed at midnight, and tied the knot. Obviously, we woke up the next morning and immediately started making plans for annulment, but then Haley looked at me and went, "What if we didn't, though?" I think her saying that was when I really knew that I loved her, because it was obvious that the only reason she said this was to see how we could piss off her dad even more. Anyway, she just texted him that she got married with a picture of our hands interlaced, and I'll be meeting him tomorrow night. I cannot wait to see the look on his face when he realizes that he brought this misfortune entirely onto his own shoulders.